You could hear 10 compliments in a day and still be haunted by that one bit of criticism. Sound familiar? That's not weakness, it's wiring. Our brains are wired to spot threats and negativity sticks like Velcro. But there is good news. With intention, we can rewire that response. Today, we're talking about why negative thinking is so persistent and what we can do to shift it. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're exploring negative thinking. Now, negative thinking isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes feeling sad or spotting something that's wrong informs us about something that's not okay in our world and something we need to change. However, one of the things that we need to recognize is our brain is kind of pre-wired to notice the negative. It's pre-wired to pick on the worst case scenarios or the what ifs. And that sometimes leads us down paths that aren't always in our best interests or in the best interests of others. So let's start off talking a little bit about the science of negative thinking. Why do we have this slight negative bias? Well, from a survival point of view, it makes complete sense. Our brain is wired, its default state is survival. It isn't happiness. Our brain isn't wired for happiness. Our brain is wired for us to survive. And therefore, noticing negative, noting potential conflicts, dangers, mistakes, all can be more beneficial to us than recognizing peace, praise, and joy. We're pre-programmed to pick up on those threat detectors. So for instance, let's say somebody walks towards you with a negative facial expression. Your brain actually processes that information more emotionally than rationally. We notice it more emotionally in that moment because somebody coming towards us with a negative facial expression could be a threat to our well-being. So we're more likely to notice people coming into a room with a negative facial expression than we are with a smile. And this makes complete sense because that person could be a danger to us. Somebody smiling at us, well, whether we want to interact with them or not is kind of irrelevant. But if somebody means us harm, then we're going to have to do some form of interaction or make some kind of avoidance or action related to that behavior. The other example I often use related to this is, if I see when we weren't top of the food chain on the savannah and I see a rustle in the bushes and it could be a lion, it could be my best mate. Well, my ancestors that assumed it was a lion were probably far more likely to survive because their best mate was just laughing at them when they were hiding up a tree. Whereas all those individuals who assumed it was their best mate probably got eaten by the lion. So from a survival point of view, negative thinking has its huge benefits. The problem is it can lead us both down negative paths about the way we see ourselves, about creating fear responses and limiting ourselves from things that might be beneficial to us because we see the worst and the what ifs rather than the positives. But it can also impact on relationships and affect our ability to connect with other people as well. So although it makes sense when we're avoiding predators, it doesn't make sense, or we can become over-fixated and it leads us down wrong paths if we're not careful. So we're not naturally negative, but we are naturally cautious. But if we don't counteract it, that negativity can take over. Now, how does this affect both the way we see ourselves and the way we see others. All of us will have those times where we look in the mirror and we notice all the things that we don't like rather than all the things that we do. It sometimes impacts on our self-esteem and our self-image. It's where we notice, some people, that perfectionist mentality where I notice the fact that I got one question in the quiz wrong. I didn't really pay attention to the fact that I got 9 out of the 10 correct. And some people are terrible for not recognizing the positives within their life. I know that I can be sometimes my own worst enemy, where even if I've done something well, my first instinct, but it wasn't quite good enough. I could have done this. I could have done that better. And although that has a place and it does drive me and allow me to actually make good practice or improve what I do, sometimes I also need to make sure I enjoy and allow myself to recognize some of the positives. Constantly thinking bad about yourself, constantly thinking and noticing your own mistakes can lead you down quite a dark path, if you like. It's also noticing the good and bad in life as well. If you're always noticing the worst case scenario, we are wired for this, which is why, bad news sells more newspapers than good news does. Our brain is pre-wired to get a higher response from negative information. We want to get that information in. So then we start to crave that negative information. The problem is that can sometimes, because we're taking in more of that can give us that skewed perspective that life is really bad, that people are really bad, rather than actually life is pretty neutral and both good and bad things happen pretty much in equal measure. But the information we're letting in means we end up being biased in one particular direction because we're not paying attention properly. We're falling into the trap, this cognitive bias that we're all guilty of unless we're very mindful of it. And so I'm very careful about what I consume, the information I consume, that I try and make sure that it is a mix of good and bad, and I don't watch too much news. It's good to know what's going on in current affairs, but it also can give you a very skewed perspective of how the world is. The problem is with noticing all the bad things out there, it also can cause us to notice the bad things about ourselves. This is why being judgmental and being critical of others isn't always good for our own self-esteem, because we assume if we're doing that to others, that everybody's going to be doing that to us as well. And if we're noticing on the flaws of every person, we tend to also then reflect that on ourselves, going, well, I also do that, but they're better at that than I am because I don't do that so well. Our own self-esteem is really important when it comes to looking after and caring for others. If we feel that we are good enough, if we feel that we can do a good job, well, the actions tend to follow our thoughts and our feelings. So how we feel about ourselves and how we think about ourselves is really important, and remembering to catch the good. This is where it's sometimes a really good idea to do things like journaling and recording or finding opportunities to record your wins, especially sharing it with others, other trusted advisors. The end of the week, rather than focusing on what you haven't achieved, just make sure you make a note of the things that you have achieved. Make sure you remember to tick off the things off your list that you didn't realize you'd done, you hadn't paid attention to properly. That's why I encourage people around me to often do like weekly win recordings, so that they're kind of then celebrating the positives in their life. It's also about managing others though. I remember very early on, I read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And a guy called Dale Carnegie, who wrote the book, referred to in there, and I'm going to misquote it, but he did refer to, if you're looking to change somebody's behavior or you're looking to increase the likelihood of somebody doing something, don't catch them being bad, notice them being good. So if your partner cleans your kitchen for you and you go in and go, well, you haven't done that bit, you haven't done that bit, and you haven't done that bit, well, they'll never try and clean that kitchen for you ever again. What's the point? You didn't appreciate anything they did do. If instead you went in there and found the one bit you really did like and you focus on that, we'd actually find we'd get a significant improvement. They try and make the rest of the kitchen hopefully look like that. Positive reinforcement, praise, acknowledgement, encouragement are all very powerful tools for changing behavior. And although with the negative side, we can get this learned helplessness. So at the end of the day, if you're thinking about how you manage and interact with other people, if you spent more time criticizing than praising, then you've had a bad day. Not them, you've had a bad day. If it takes kind of good 5 to 7 compliments to overcome any criticism, and even with feedback, we know that it should always be, the poo sandwich principle of a positive, then a negative, and then a positive. I mean, that's just a 100% increase. But as far as Making sure we're doing more than that. At the end of the day, have I done more praising or criticizing? Make sure you're reflecting back on that. And it doesn't mean you should then beat yourself up and be self-critical. It should be a case of, hey, how can I do that better tomorrow? How can I get one more praise in? We also then, because of the criticism, we often make these assumptions that people are choosing to be difficult, because we then attribute agency to the negative things that happen. That's a natural human thing as well. When the wind blew and caused damage to our huts, then there was an agent that did that rather than really understanding it. It's exactly the same when we're looking at other people's behavior. They purposely did that to hurt us. They purposely did that to ruin that. Rather than recognizing it, they're not choosing to be difficult. They're struggling to communicate their needs. They're struggling to express themselves. They don't know how else to cope in this situation. So we tend to make that assumption of intent when we're focusing on the negative. Also, because we tend to then stereotype out as well, like we go to a restaurant, we have one bad meal, we assume that restaurant is bad rather than I had one bad meal. We often, so often when we notice a negative about something, we then attribute that one negative thing to the whole entity, the whole service, the whole organization, the whole individual. They've done one bad thing, so they are bad. They served one bad meal, so they're rubbish. I wasn't in the mood for that on that day, and therefore it was awful. So that's the problem with labeling. And again, we so often notice the negative rather than the positive. So, when a politician tells a lie, we call them a liar, even though they will have told truth, but we'd never call them a truther. But you can't be a liar and a truther at the same time. Why do we always focus on the one? And if you think about how constantly being told that you either are something or you're not good enough, or noticing all your weaknesses and flaws, that's not going to have a tendency to increase your self-esteem if other people aren't focusing on where you're actually good, where your strengths are, where your abilities are, of which we all have some. So an individual who's been told off or told they're not good enough 10 times in a day rarely hears they're doing anything right. Well, they're going to start to just believe, well, what's the point in trying to be good if I'm always wrong? So reframing, what can we start to do? One, catch them doing it right. But you need to have clear ideas in your head is what is right for you? What is good? What are we looking for? Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to catch it. You're never going to notice the time somebody does something right for you because you're too busy. The innate quality is to notice the negative. You have to recognize this as a human flaw, which means you have to work harder. You have to have strategies in place, plans in place. It's the same as the instinct may be fight, flight, freeze, but then we decide not to. We have other strategies that we do to re-regulate ourselves, calm ourselves down. Well, that's exactly the same thing when it comes to our instinct is to notice the negative. So how are we going to reframe this and how are we going to help ourselves to catch the positive? We can also then making sure when we're feeding back anybody, we start to notice a positive rather than negative. There's a wonderful tool that I often like to use in de-escalation called alignment. In everything a person ever says, there'll be at least 2% of truth. What we tend to do is we focus on negative. We focus on what we see as the untruth. So you imagine, let's say that I worked in a call center and a customer calls up and starts ranting about the fact that this is the 15th time they've called and they can never get through to the right person and they just get passed from pillar to post and you've been through 20 different departments and nobody seems to know what they're doing and they're fed up with their service and and you've asked for it to be sent out and it has never been sent out. Right. There may have been an awful lot of untruth in what this person just said. The instinct is to kind of then argue with them, go, well, you haven't called that many times, I can see from the record. We don't have that many departments. You haven't been passed down that many. We have tried to send this out, it says in my records. And congratulations, you've got a confrontation. Instead, if we're trying to focus in on what was the truth in what they said, what was the thing that we know is correct? And all that we may have is that maybe they feel like that. I'm so sorry you feel that we haven't met your needs. I'm so sorry you feel we haven't, if you feel we haven't taken you seriously or whatever it is, but focus and validate on the feelings first before you then focus on the facts of the situation, which may be the untruths. One of the things that I'd encourage as far as for those of you out there, whether you're a parent, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a teacher, how are you developing strategies to start catching the positive? Have you made it clear within your guidelines, within your behavioral policy of what you are looking for as far as the positive behaviors? Do you know can you reframe certain situations to actually recognize the positive in a behavior? So let's say a child is doing something you don't want them to. Let's say even a toddler is climbing over some cushions and you don't want them to go down there and you keep building the cushions higher, but they find a way round it. We could still validate the fact that, do you know what? That is so clever the way you've managed to get around that, but we're still going to have to stop you because this is dangerous. So sometimes you can even find the positive in something that you don't want. We can also look at what we might class as negative behavior, but reframed it. We could maybe say that there was a positive attribute to it. Is defiance, meaning they're able to say, to be assertive. If they just reframed it and did it in a slightly different way, then actually we'd have a really good skill there. We're just framing it in the wrong way. But one of the things we can do is at the end of the day, name 3 things that went well in your day. If you're looking after others, sometimes it can be, you leave at the end of looking after your parent, or you leave for a room looking after an individual and it's not gone well. And it can be easy at the end of the day to go, I've had a rough day. But even if they're tiny, try and find 3 things that I think, yeah, that went all right, actually. That was okay. And even if it wasn't just not bad, maybe we could just count that as a win. But over time, the idea of this is we're training our brain. We have to overcome that innate kind of desire to focus on the negative and start to then catch the positive. As we said, negative isn't always a bad thing. It can lead us to detrimental pathways, can lead us to be somebody who is a drain rather than a tap that gives energy to others. If you're always pulling down, if you're always focusing on the negative, it does kind of feed or kind of ooze out of some people that they're always on that negative side. The glass is always half empty rather than half full. And all evidence shows that those who see that the glass is half full have a better and longer life and less health issues. This is physiological, not just psychological. So to finish us off, our brains may be wired to spot the storm, but we can train ourselves to see the sunlight too. It's not about ignoring the hard stuff. It's about not letting it be the whole story. One of my favorite analogies that comes from acceptance and commitment therapy is the blue sky. You are always the pure blue sky, even though sometimes the weather seems to be covering you up. The positive is always there. The values are always there. The good person is always there. Remember that about yourself, but also remember that about others as well. So try and end your day with 3 positive messages. Message me what you noticed. Send something in the comments. Is this something you're able to do? Or do you disagree with me? Do you think it's better to see the glass as half empty? If you found this episode useful or interesting, please like, comment, and share. And please, like, comment positively and share rather than negative. Thanks. Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behavior that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behavior can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later, wishing for an umbrella. What if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature, and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict, and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience, and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities, or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation, and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today.